So make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening and welcome along to another episode of Neil Oliver Live on GB News TV and on radio. Tonight on the programme we'll discuss the row over traffic control plans by Oxfordshire County Council, which have been likened to a lockdown by critics. New Zealand has been gripped by a case in which parents lost custody of their child after refusing to accept blood donations from unvaccinated donors. It's a tough time of year for households financially. We'll ask what can be done to alleviate the problems a lot of families are obviously facing. Plus, plenty of chat with my panellists Emma Sale, Tom Buick and Liam Halligan. All of that and more coming up. But first, an update on the latest news from Tatiana Sanchez.
Neil, thank you. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. At least 3 people have been killed in an explosion on the island of Jersey. The blast happened at a block of flats in the early hours of the morning in St Helier. It's feared the number of casualties could still climb, with around a dozen people thought to be missing. Chief Fire Officer Paul Brown says the search and rescue operation could take days.
It is a total collapse. And so the primary challenge is that, one, it is dangerous to operate in and around the area, but secondly, anything that we do or don't do in the wrong way might then jeopardise the chances of survival for somebody who might yet be able to be, sort of rescued. So we have to do everything in a slow, methodical way, and we have to make sure that all of the right equipment with the right expertise is in place in order to do that.
Energy regulator Ofgem says it's extremely concerned that vulnerable people in Sheffield have been without gas for a week. Hundreds of customers were left without heating after a water main burst last Friday, saturating the gas network. Ofgem has described the situation as extremely difficult, made worse by the sudden cold snap. Distribution company Cadent says all affected homes and commercial properties will be automatically compensated. Meanwhile, freezing temperatures have been causing travel problems across the country. Manchester Airport was forced to temporarily close both runways after heavy snow, affecting dozens of flights. Yellow warnings are in place across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, the southwest and southeast of England this weekend, with temperatures expected to drop to as low as -10 degrees in some isolated areas. Well, momentum is building with the World Cup quarter-final between England and France kicking off in just under an hour's time. Millions of people are expected to watch the game, hoping beyond hope that Gareth Southgate's team will outclass the defending champions. The winner will face Morocco, which has become the first African nation to make it through to the semi-finals after beating Portugal 1-0. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister and French President have been getting their jibes in early. Emmanuel Macron tweeted that he was looking forwards to the game and asked Rishi Sunak would he wish Le Blues luck if his team makes it through, while the Prime Minister responded saying, hopefully, we won't have to, and asked if the sentiment would be reciprocated. RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch has called for an urgent meeting with the Prime Minister. It's to try to resolve the long-running dispute over paying conditions for rail workers. Union members are due to stage 2 48-hour strikes next week following months of industrial action over the deadlocked row. Travel expert Simon Calder told GB News most people travelling by train have nothing to worry about.
Train operators, the government, everybody else is saying, don't try and travel. Please don't. Stay away, stay away. Ignore that. There are, and I've surveyed all of this, there's more trains running during these strikes than there have during any of the previous national strikes, which have been going on since June, OK? So as long as you're wanting to go on one of the main intercity lines, you live in one of the big cities, then there's going to be trains between about 8 in the morning and 6 in the evening.
Around 200 migrants have been intercepted crossing the Channel this morning. One group managed to land on a beach at Samphire Hoe near Dover. They've now been taken to the Manston Processing Centre. Calmer conditions are reportedly making the journey easier today. Over 44,000 people have crossed the Channel so far this year. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Neil.
Thanks, Tatiana. Winter arrived last week, and with it a dose of reality. All that talk about wrapping up warm in the house, putting on an extra jumper, hot water bottles, full-size onesies. It's dangerous nonsense. It might be fine for a while if you're a healthy adult, but it's a tragedy in slow motion for babies, young children, the elderly, the sick. And it's only the second week in December. It's a long time until spring. Even if layering up and donning a hat were enough to keep a body going, once cold properly gets a grip of a house, it too starts to die in its own way. The creep of dampness that takes its own toll on house and health alike. Frozen pipes followed by burst pipes and not enough plumbers to go round. People who can't afford to heat their homes are likely struggling with spiking food bills as well. All of this in a first world country that was home to the Industrial Revolution that changed the world for the better and lifted billions out of poverty. Now the grannies saved by locking down the world until its heart stopped beating are sitting down to die alone of cold and hunger. It's amazing how inventive the establishment has proven to be in coming up with ways to invite the elderly to die miserable, lonely deaths. Our so-called leaders tell us all of it is a price worth paying, by which they mean worth paying by us, the little people. All the decisions are being made by those who have no intention whatever of spending so much as 5 minutes in an unheated home. Turn up the thermostat and fill out the expenses claim. That's the order of the day for our elected representatives. All around them are those that can't afford to heat their own homes, but are forced to subsidise the warmth of the sociopaths that put us here with their hubris and eco-vanity. Regardless of what nonsense they spout about the causes, Putin, climate, whatever, at least know that the misery here now and that lies ahead for millions is entirely the consequence of decades of willful destruction in the name of saving the world. A green agenda that absolutely is not green. Remember a few months back when a few hot days in a row occasioned yet more fear porn about imminent climate catastrophe? Now the temperature is below zero and all we hear is cheery twaddle about clear blue skies and hopes for a white Christmas. For anyone still concerned, I'm here to tell you the polar bears are doing fine. I'm told numbers are on the up as never before and the ice in Antarctica is getting thicker every day. And if one more TV presenter waxes lyrical about the joys of one-pot meals and watching telly while wrapped in a duvet, where is the outrage on behalf of millions who can't afford to turn on one radiator in one room? in a country where centuries' worth of energy lies beneath our feet. Putin didn't order the West to put him in control of the energy required to keep the lights on in Europe. Everyone used to go cap in hand to Russia. Europe's leaders outsourced energy production so they could crow about cutting emissions at home. Where we are now is entirely the consequence of politicians competing with one another to see which of them can take the title of world's most psychopathic hypocrite. We aren't allowed the energy available from a century of gas beneath our feet here in Britain because it's not green, but we're paying top dollar for 9 billion cubic litres, twice as much as last year's order of gas fracked out of the ground in the United States. Now we're dependent on Uncle Sam. Say what you like about sippy cup Joe Biden, but he's played a blinder there. Well done, the big guy. I wonder about that sabotage of Nord Stream 2. I really do. A report published by Lancet reminded the world that around 5 million people die every year on account of climate extremes. Of those deaths, 4.5 million are caused by cold compared to 500,000 attributed to heat. In our time on this planet, an interglacial between ice ages, it's always the cold that is far more of a deadly threat to human life, 10 or 20 times as deadly. And yet still the priests of the new religion of climate fear preach that we must cool the world. You've probably heard that 97% of scientists are agreed that humans are the cause of climate change. It comes from research carried out in 2013. Do you know how that team obtained that number? They gathered nearly 12,000 scientific papers dealing with global climate change. They didn't read the papers, heavens no, that would have been proper research. Instead, they looked at just the summary paragraphs on the front covers. On that basis, they grouped them into 4 piles. 3,896 papers agreed humans were to blame for climate change. 7,930 took no position either way. 78 rejected the idea of it being humanity's fault, and 40 were uncertain altogether. That initial pass gave a figure of just 32% blaming humans for climate change. Obviously, that wasn't nearly scary enough. So then came the gross and clumsy cheat. The 7,930 papers that took no position on whether humans are to blame were removed from the final analysis. With them gone, the figure of 32% went up to 97%. And the likes of Barack Obama and Al Gore have been quoting it ever since. If my interpretation's correct, this is the kind of deliberate tampering with evidence that underpins the net zero madness that's being pursued by the zealots running our countries, or rather ruining our countries. In a book published in 1997, physicist Carl Sagan wrote the following: "We've arranged a global civilization in which most crucial elements, transportation, communications and all other industries, agriculture, medicine, education, entertainment, protecting the environment, and even the key democratic institution of voting, profoundly depend on science and technology. We have also arranged things so that almost no one understands science and technology. This is a prescription for disaster. We might get away with it for a while, but sooner or later, this combustible mixture of ignorance and power is going to blow up in our faces." In this context, it's our leaders who either fail to understand science and just parrot whatever propaganda lands in their inbox each day, or they do understand and they're lying. Either way, it's the prescription for disaster predicted by Sagan. Agenda 2030, net zero, is a second Titanic, and this time the whole world's being herded aboard like cattle. The passengers on the original Titanic had no way of knowing what lay ahead for them in the North Atlantic. This time around, though, millions of people who could and should know better, who have no excuse now for not knowing, who could and should have realised long ago that they were being lured and lied towards disaster, are actually buying tickets for the ride on Agenda 2030. A ship of fools. 1,500 people were lost when Titanic went to the bottom. This time it's the lives of billions. I've said it before and I'll keep saying it. What lies beneath all the madness that's keeping so many millions of people perpetually on edge, just knowing that something somewhere has gone very badly wrong, is an attack on humanity itself. This fact, above all others, must be understood. We are described as useless people. We need to accept smaller, colder, hungrier lives. We should swap beef and chicken for beetles and worms. And if you're white, you're the product of original sin, bad from birth and owing creation itself an apology just for being here. Last year in Canada, 10,000 people died by euthanasia, 3% of all deaths in the country. A disabled veteran and former Paralympian, retired Corporal Christine Gauthier, says she was offered euthanasia instead of waiting any longer to have a stair lift fitted in her home. After years of asking, Gauthier was told by a health worker, quote, "Madam, if you're really so desperate, we can give you medical assistance in dying now." She only wanted a stair lift. Canada's euthanasia programme is soon to grow wider. Next year there are plans to offer death to people who are mentally ill, which hardly bodes well for the clinically depressed. Plans are underway to help under-18s die too, if they want to. Human life is being devalued as easily as our currencies. Last week there was yet another variation on the theme of stripping us of more of what it has meant to be human and alive. Also lurking under the darkening umbrella of Agenda 2030 is climate lockdown. It's here already in the form of the 15-minute city. In Britain, the scam scheme is being rolled out first in Oxford. Everyone will be confined to one of 6 ghettos inside which they might live out their lives on foot or perhaps by bike. The Labour Liberal Green Council responsible says it will go ahead whether people like it or not. Every resident must register their car with the council, which will use number recognition cameras to monitor their movements around the clock. Anyone driving out of their designated ghetto more than 100 times a year will be fined. This is about one agenda and one agenda only: keeping people apart, increasing the atomisation of society, the deliberate division of people into smaller and smaller dependent units. This outrage proposed in Oxford is the tip of an iceberg, because we humans, we useless people, we hackable animals are so suboptimal, so contemptible in the eyes of our self-appointed superiors, we must be watched at all times. It's not just in Oxford. In every city there are cameras monitoring everyone's every move. Forget the nonsense of the 15-minute city. It's simply and plainly the bars of the cage of climate lockdown. COVID ran out of steam, and so the next excuse for total control is the weather. Here in Britain, it starts in Oxford, but the 15-minute city nonsense is already all over the world. Plans are in place for London, for Paris, for Milan, for Krakow in Poland, and in scores more places besides. In Melbourne, zero COVID zealot Dan Andrews, the Premier, recently re-elected by those in favour of seeing fellow citizens brutalised in the street by black-clad stormtroopers, waxes lyrical about a 20-minute city. Don't bother with the details, just remember the word, lockdown. A word that came from prison parlance is now all around us. The excuse keeps changing, but lockdown remains the same. What should we do? For a start, we can stay awake and not be distracted by bread and circuses. Ignore the self-pitying of royal narcissists for a start and pay attention instead to better examples by far. Remember those who stood up against totalitarians, against those who despised fellow human beings and would take away their rights and their lives. Last week, we lost Squadron Leader Johnny Johnson, last surviving member of the Dambusters raid. He was born into relative poverty. He lost his mum when he was 3. His dad was less than kind to him, to put it mildly. He was mostly raised by his big sister. He volunteered for service in the Second World War and eventually made his way into 617 Squadron, the Dambusters. He was married and raised 3 children. After the war, he was a teacher in primary schools and then helping patients at Rampton Psychiatric Hospital. He served as a local councillor. He was a warrior, a teacher and a public servant in that order. He was a husband and father. Given a choice between multimillionaire, self-obsessed self-publicists and self-serving politicians, a selfless man like Squadron Leader Johnny Johnson, MBE, Distinguished Flying Medal, I know who I'd stand beside. Here's the thing. We're being constantly goaded to see our own species, this human race, as the source of all ills. I say we are not. The technocrats and authoritarians want to treat us like lab rats. It's time we all got up on our hind legs and remembered what we are truly capable of. That's my opinion, of course, and you're free to disagree. Keep your tweets and emails coming throughout the show. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk and you can tweet me as well at gbnews, and I'll try to get to your comments later in the show. What do you think, Liam? Euthanasia in Canada. What do you make of that story about the Paralympian?
Just astonishing. I've never seen that statistic, Neil, on euthanasia, and it's just one of a smorgasbord, a feast of interesting insights in that monologue. I thought, What I'd like to pick up on is the extent to which you are now openly criticising the net zero agenda. You've always been quite sceptical. You're now deriding it. And I think that what that reflects, Neil, if I may say so, is how what we call the Overton window of public debate has shifted, where respectable opinions are seen to lie. This time last year, before Russia invaded Ukraine, before most journalists, most of the political media class even knew what a megawatt hour was or a billion cubic metre of gas. They know now, don't they? Mm-hmm. When energy policy was for nerds and economists like me, it would have been, what you just said there would have been seen as way out there, with all due respect. Now what you're saying is increasingly mainstream, because we can all see the importance of energy security. We can all see how vulnerable we are when energy prices spike. We can all see, staring us in the face, even the National Grid is now saying that we do face the prospect, not the possibility, but the prospect, not a probability, of blackouts as the weather drops. And we have had a cold snap over the last week. I think what I'd say is that I want to see us use less fossil fuels, and I know you do too. But like you, Neil, I don't believe in the catastrophism, the fear porn that you talked about. We want a sensible discussion about how we are going to use less dirty fuels, how we're going to pollute this wonderful planet of ours less. And I know you want to do that too. But where do the costs of that transition fall? Who pays for net zero? And until this point, it seems to have been the working man and woman that pays, the ordinary people having their vans and cars taken away. I think all that now has changed. Politics is starting to shift.
Emma, I'm listening to Liam, and I'm not this dirty energy. For me, the problem is the waste and the mess that we make. You know, it's the throwing away. It's the planned obsolescence of everything we buy that just goes into landfill. Isn't it more an issue that we're a wasteful civilization now? That's the challenge, if you really care about that.
Yeah, we some of mum friends of mine at school, they do this thing called TerraCycle, and that's having big collections of all waste, and it is disgusting. It's outside the school gates, and you know, even our kids have looked and gone that level, and the level we use and how, and just and you look at it and you just go, the amount of packaging. And I think that's part of it, as you were saying, it's everyone is so conscious of it now and aware of it, and you can see it, and it disgusts, you know, every day I'm disgusted by myself of what, yeah.
Don't you think, I mean, I don't know where you are on that, Tom, but it's the mass production of all this stuff that just ends up being thrown away. It's all consuming energy. Mm. You know, it's two sides of the same equation. If we were less wasteful, then surely the consumption of energy would be less of a problem.
Yeah, and we've got a political class, of course, that's traded away our energy security over recent years, and that's why we're in the predicament that Liam rightly outlines. But just coming back to your monologue, Neil, because as ever, week in, week out, I think you bring words and eloquence to how millions of people, I think, out there feel about the state of politics. And what you were saying there, and quoting Sagan about science and technology. I mean, it's nothing new, is it? And you know this better than any as an historian going back millennia, that civilizations have always had an uneasy relationship with changes in science, technology, agriculture, and indeed those in power. I think the question for us today that we all need to ask is, are those in power actually serving the interests of the people that they get elected to serve? And that's why, just picking up on this final point, that hit me between the eyes about your monologue and the example, I know we're going to talk about it later in the show, about Oxfordshire County Council, the City Council. I've been a councillor in the past myself, so I know a little bit about what goes on in local government. And I think the answer there, and this is where, in a sense, we've got to turn this from a potential council of despair into remembering that we are the demos, right? And, you know, we do still live nominally in a democracy, and we can change the people that make these decisions over us. So, you know, I mean, I say to those people who live in Oxford, they're not happy with electronic filters and the idea of 100 passes being given out a year. I mean, God knows who decides that in a town hall, who's worthy of being able to get out of their particular part of the city. Vote those people out and vote people in, even if it's on a single issue, anti-permit in Oxford Council. Get those people into power and make the changes. So I think we've got to have some positivism about this as well. You know, we're not victims of a technocratic class. There's a danger that we fall into that hole.
Claim agency. Yeah. Got to go to a break now, after which local leaders in Oxford have approved plans to put traffic filters on some main roads. That's how they're describing it. The council say the move is needed to reduce congestion, but critics have compared the scheme to COVID containment measures. We'll be asking who's right.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. Oxford County Council, in their inestimable wisdom, have decided their city should be split into 6 15-minute neighbourhoods. Residents will be allowed to drive out of their zone 100 times a year. Any subsequent trips will attract a fine. A council spokesman has said it's about having all essential needs met within a 15-minute of home. Critics, however, say it will hurt businesses. Joining me now to discuss the pros and cons is Neil Crowley, who has campaigned against such measures. Thanks for joining me, Neil. First of all, is this just another front in the endless war on the car and indeed people's freedom of movement?
I think it's definitely an attack on, well, I see on people's freedom of movement, but also people's living standards. I grew up without a car. My community, there were very few people had cars, and that was only 30, 40 years ago. No central heating either. So I think it's a relatively short amount of time that ordinary people have been able to afford such things, and now we're being told to give them up straight away. Because of problems of the climate, and it's what's been announced in Oxford has really blown up. I think if you try and look up the article, the first thing you get is that it's been fact-checked and proved to be false. Facebook are actually stopping the article going up, and really the facts of the meat of the piece was announced in October, that they're, as you say, they're dividing Oxford up into 6 zones that you can only leave a certain amount of times. And Canterbury have announced a similar thing with 5 zones. Derbyshire Council are putting AMPR cameras across the city to monitor people's movements.
What gives them the right to operate like this? Councillors. What gives them the authority to deem whether or not it's appropriate for a private person to go about their business in the way in which they want to do.
I think people have ignored, that people have become very disaffected with local democracy, so they become, there's also almost an attitude of letting them get on with it, as long as they fix the drains and run local services. But things have been really changing over the last few years. They've learned to operate with very few, checks and balances. And I think they put the cart before the horse, if you like, rather than them being elected representatives answerable to us, we are becoming more and more answerable to them. And they're doing much more authoritarian things. And because it's not on a local level, I think it's going under the radar a little. So I was in Tottenham this week where there's a lot of low traffic neighbourhoods coming in over the past few weeks. And people there don't know what's going on in Hackney. People in Islington don't know what's going on in Hackney. And I think it's starting to shift now. And I think they've probably done us a favour.
Well, people.
I think the pro-LTM, pro-road closure, they call it active travel. It's presented in a very positive way. It's about low traffic neighbourhoods. It's about making streets more friendly and safe. But really, the main thing is about climate. I've said from the start, they're not really interested in, safer neighbourhoods and anything. It's about carbon and climate, and we are just numbers to be moved on a graph, really. And that's really, really frightening. But just on these moments like this, when a politician lets slip what they're really doing, and people take a bit of a step back and say, wow, is that what this is about? And the idea of zoning cities really frightens people. It conjures up, Eastern Europe, China. There's something sci-fi about it, isn't there?
And so it should.
Absolutely.
In essence, for thousands of years, the idea of living in a city was the connectedness of it. Mm-hmm. Everyone was whatever within the city boundaries, and theoretically you could move wherever. Yes, you would have your home and you would have a local area, but it was the connectivity of it and the connectedness of it to all of those people and all of that potential that was the raison d'etre for there being a city.
Yeah. And beyond that as well. Beyond that, I think about how a nation works, our nation. I started out on this writing about what was going on in Islington two years ago during lockdown, because it was one of the first places where it started. And there, the people of Islington marched from Islington Town Hall along the A1. And when I was reading and writing for it, the significance of the A1 really jumped out at me. I mean, you'd know better than me that it's a pre-Roman road, and it's the longest road in Britain, and it goes, technically goes all the way from England to Scotland. And it's an incredible thing. And you think about the progress that has been made in bringing us together as a nation.
What do we do? I mean, increasingly people ask me, what do we do? And all I can do really with that is ask other people in this context, what should we do to persuade or to remind people like Oxfordshire County Council that we will not be told how to live our lives, that is not their remit?
Yeah. It's an interesting dilemma. I've been following and working a little bit with the Together campaign that have done a lot of work, really successful work with fighting the lockdown and the vaccine passports, and had a lot of success there. And what they want to do, which is something that really appealed to me, is really just find ways of putting the public back at the centre of things. Because I think politicians at the moment know that they can ignore the public. They're more interested in the views of a few cycling campaigns, but the public is so kind of fragmented. I mean, we need a coherent kind of vehicle, really, that will push our views into the centre of public
such a dilemma
public
for
life.
people, though, because in the past, generations past, it would have been the council, the town council, the parish council, or whatever would have been that place to which people would have taken their concerns, and they would have expected action, and they would have expected it to be, moved up the chain of command, and they would have expected resolution. Yeah. But now that it's a top-down thing, now the diktats just come from on high, and councillors indulge themselves in thinking that they wield the power.
I think it's kind of a product of the last 30, 40 years of political disengagement. If you remember before Brexit, there was a lot of, we need to engage the public. We need to engage. What do we do? Get them to vote in supermarkets. And as soon as you ask the public what they think, they would, they gave the wrong answer. So I think our political class, if you want to call it that, are adept now at being self-sufficient and keeping the public at bay. It's really interesting that the whenever the councils come into contact with the public over low traffic neighbourhoods and any of these issues, they react by accusing people of racism, xenophobia, bigotry, violence. The leader of Haringey Council used all of those terms last week about a small, peaceful demo, and also made comparisons with the Capitol Hill, January the 6th. It felt a bit like Capitol Hill. This is the language they use against the public,
It does beg the question, who do they think they are?
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned earlier, for me, the whole thing is a smokescreen or a sleight of hand to distract us from climate lockdown. And I think this is what this is. I think these types of schemes, and many more to come, are because of this obsession with getting people pinned down, atomised, isolated, locked off in smaller and smaller spaces under the guise of,
I mean, I think it is heading that way. I don't think there's any grand plan. I think they're just grappling around in the dark, really. I think that kind of managed decline idea is probably where we're going. There is no vision from our politicians. Excuse me. So really all they're doing is just managing decline, and on the idea of opening a coal station or a coal plant or a nuclear power station or anything like that is reacted to with horror, and all we can do is just buckle down, so save what we've got. It's almost like put on a war footing where we all just have to have rations. But I might be wrong, but I don't see any great.
They seem to be selling us pessimism. They seem to be telling us prepare for the worst all the time about everything. To do with the war in Ukraine, to do with disease, to do with climate.
Yeah.
Everything is just prepare for the worst.
Yeah.
It's bad now, and it's going to get worse.
Yeah, but I would say my experience of working with people, the public, and campaigns on that is that there's enormous amounts of potential, very smart people. I think we can. Address these things and solve a lot of our problems. The public are very, very resourceful. And it's just a shame that such talent is just kind of pushed to the side.
Aren't people forced again and again and again in the direction of civil disobedience? If you live in a city that's being controlled in this way, and it's affecting your ability to earn a living, affecting your mental health or whatever, people, ought to defy it en masse.
Yeah,
ultimately,
you said that, not me.
If no one's listening,
yeah, but you wouldn't blame them, would you? Really? I mean, in Hackney and Islington, where I've been working, people were accused of doing all kinds of things they hadn't actually done. Well, at the same time, our mayor supports, actively supports Extinction Rebellion, and all these organisations that are actually attacking art and causing havoc and civil disobedience. I think that the British public is actually probably a bit too well behaved at the moment, and we do need to find ways of putting ourselves back right at the centre of things.
And even if it was about the city, what about people? If you take a typical city, there will be poor places, there will be under-resourced places, areas, territories, whatever you want to call them, and there will be those that have it all, that have all the nice shishi bars and restaurants and the art galleries and whatever. So what becomes of people who their designated zone is one of deprivation?
Yeah,
and they're told that they stay there, and they can't even go to or aspire to, ultimately reaching the better parts of the city.
No, absolutely.
Psychologically, what is the impact?
Well, if you think about public transport, we're lucky in London, but I was in Birmingham a couple of weeks back and was reminded of my childhood by waiting for a bus for 45 minutes in the cold and rain. And, the public transport is not great in many parts of the country, and resources and the things, as you said, the things that are available to people. So it's about forcing down our expectations, It's not been that long since we were able to go abroad and travel and see all of those things.
Yes, remember those days?
Yeah. And, I don't know about you, but I grew up with no central heating. by the way, Islington Council are actually turning down people's communal heating at the moment, which is pretty shocking, which is, I think is pretty kind of part of that. Expect less. You've got to expect less.
I say again, how dare they? Neil Crowley, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you very much.
I should say I have a statement from the council which reads, traffic filters have been part of Oxford's transport strategy since 2015 and are a key tool to reduce traffic congestion in Oxford. Traffic filters are not designed to stop people from driving private vehicles. Everywhere in the city will still be accessible by car, although some private car drivers may need to use a different route during the operating hours. Vehicles going through the traffic filters will be monitored by automatic number plate recognition cameras, not by electronic gates or any other physical barriers. It's just under half an hour until England take on reigning champions France in the World Cup quarter-finals in Qatar. GB News reporter Paul Hawkins has been in Doha for us throughout the tournament. Paul, what is the mood out there approaching the big match?
Well, the mood at the moment, as you can tell by these horns that you'll probably hear throughout my report, honking continuously. The Moroccan fans here, tens of thousands of them streaming out because Morocco are through to the World Cup semi-finals. The first African side to reach the semi-finals, first Arab country to reach the semi-finals. Big historic moment for the country and for the region. And here, they've become a kind of figurehead for the Arab world, really. So a lot of partisan support here. People are driving around, honking their horns, hanging out of car roofs, waving flags. These huge buildings that you see around Qatar, draped or kind of lit up in the Moroccan flag. So there's a lot of noise around at the moment. But in terms of the England-France atmosphere, it's building. There's not long to go until kick-off. A lot of anticipation. I would say probably more nerves on the French side. They're the favourites to win this, marginal favourites. There's another group of Morocco fans
that'll be some Moroccans.
There you go. yeah, exactly. But I would say the France fans are feeling a little bit anxious, to be honest, speaking to them today. They're marginal favourites to win, but they know that England have the tools in their armoury, they have the players that can win the game. It's a little bit of a similar matchup to Croatia and Brazil yesterday. Brazil the favourites to win it, but Croatia saw it right through to the end and they overcame the odds and they had enough in their tank to get them over the line. And so it's a little bit like that one. So we're looking forward to it. We've had the England team news through. They're unchanged from the lineup that faced Senegal. France also unchanged as well. Kylian Mbappe matching up against Kyle Walker. You've got Harry Kane up against Hugo Lloris, both of whom play for Spurs. Remember, history is against England in the sense that England and France have only met 7 times in competitive matches, and England haven't beaten France since the 1982 World Cup. In fact, they've only beaten them in 2 competitive matches ever. So France win when it matters, and England are going to have to overturn history if they want to get through to that World Cup semi-final against the honking Moroccans.
Excellent stuff, Paul. Thank you for that, and enjoy whatever it is that lies ahead for you this evening. Hope it goes the way you want it to. That was Paul Hawkins, GB News reporter in Doha for us. Another break. Now we'll be discussing the news that a court in New Zealand has taken temporary custody of a sick child whose parents blocked life-saving heart surgery because potential blood donors may have been vaccinated against COVID.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. This next story makes my blood run cold. A court in New Zealand has seized temporary custody of a sick baby after his parents requested that any blood used in his upcoming heart surgery should come from people who had not been jabbed against COVID-19. Baby W, as he has been identified in court papers, is in urgent need of an operation to save his life, but his parents don't want him to come in contact with blood from those who had taken the jab. His parents testified that dozens of unjabbed donors had offered to give blood, but the health authorities said such a provision was complicated and unnecessary. Molly Kingsley of the Us For Them campaign group fighting for children's rights joins me now. Good evening, Molly. Thanks for being with me.
Hi, Neil.
This goes to the heart, does it not, of the rights of the parent versus the state?
Absolutely, absolutely it does. And it raises, I think the first thing to say about this particular case is it is a very extreme case. And I don't actually think there is an easy or clear-cut answer here. So this child needed life-saving treatment. He was obviously very, very, very poorly. You know, the hospital were adamant that there wasn't an easy solution where unvaccinated blood would be made available. Now, I know that has been disputed in some media reports. I think there's also been a degree of exaggeration. So there's various media reports, things on social media saying the child was kidnapped. You know, that's not the case. The child wasn't kidnapped. The court, you know, temporarily seized guardianship of him. Now, that is extreme, but actually this goes, you know, way hundreds of years back, where you have a history of the state, be it in our country or other countries, on occasion intervening in the private family life when it considers that children's welfare is seriously at risk. But I totally take your point, Neil. It raises some really, really difficult questions about the limits of parental autonomy. And I'm sure we would say that actually parental autonomy ought to be pretty much absolute. And particularly what happens, as is going to happen more and more often, when a child is faced with an operation, needing a blood transfusion. And, you know, in any country, and actually this is a very similar case happened in Italy recently as well, where again, it was ruled that an operation for a 2-year-old had to go ahead with blood from vaccinated when the parents were very against this.
Emma, where are you on this? You know, what's your instinctive reaction to hearing that the state, when it feels like it, takes over?
It's a tricky one, because I can see where medically they say in the way the blood is used and not sifted, but goes the process the blood goes through is the vaccine it's not in it, if that makes sense. So you can medically go, but it doesn't really matter because it's not, the effects of the vaccine isn't in vaccinated blood, if you know, on that. But then to me, I'm quite black and white and gone, well, if you've got people unvaccinated and enough blood, well, why can't they just line up and you collect that blood and use it?
Yeah, Molly, the medics in New Zealand argued that to accede to the parents' request would set what they called a dangerous precedent. But surely the dangerous precedent that matters here was set when states around the world did all but mandate the vaccines for their citizens, whether they wanted it or not. We're now on the other side of that, and so the precedent was set by the state. And if people have come up with a solution to that, to set up blood banks or whatever, then ought that not to be taken seriously into account for those that want it?
I mean, I would absolutely agree with that, particularly for children. And I think, and I don't know if you saw, there was another story last week that I thought was quite interesting as well on this and related to this, which was the one about the case of Yulia Hicks, who was a 14-year-old in America, and she was refused, again, a life-saving kidney transplant because she wasn't herself vaccinated against COVID, and Duke University Hospital refused to treat her. And I think this is exactly the thing, Neil. We have set such a dangerous precedent here where we have a vaccine that has been, forced in some cases, pressurized onto populations, including children, on the basis of the most appalling misinformation from authorities. And we've got ourselves into a real mess here, haven't we? Where, rightly, in my view, there are many, many parents who simply will not give this vaccine at this point to their children. Mm-hmm. And I think, myself included, feel that it never should have been rolled out at this point to children. And we're seeing the real world implications of that. And, I would absolutely agree that actually there is a medical need now to ensure that we don't dig in with what many of us think has been one of the grossest, ethical crimes, actually, in history. And actually we let children and parents make these decisions on the basis of their best interests.
I was really troubled by the way in which the language that was being used in the coverage in this country as well. In the Daily Mail, for example, quote, the couple used discredited arguments and fringe anti-vax theories to try to show that the jabs were unsafe, end quote. But there's plenty of evidence that shows that many people have been killed or injured by these medical products. So it's not fringe to harbour concerns that putting this medical product into your baby's arm might be to their detriment. That's not fringe. That's just a reasonable stance.
No, it's an absolutely reasonable stance. It's a stance, actually, that was the right stance and that, we all should have had because we owe a duty to children. And I think we've talked about it before, haven't we? But this smearing of anyone who disagreed as anti-vax or a conspiracy theorist is just a very blatant attempt to delegitimize serious and, in fact, essential debate. And the more we carry on doing that, the more we're going to bed in that mistake. And actually, I think, once you have a vaccine being rolled out to a population, including children, on the basis of wrong, false, misleading information that in some jurisdictions has now been confirmed, we know that to be the case, and then you add coercion into that, I mean, that's a really, really serious failing that we're talking about here. And actually, many of us are very well within our rights to say, actually, we feel deeply uncomfortable with this product being given to children.
Molly Kingsley of Us For Them, thank you so much for your insight this evening, and I'm sure we will talk again about related subjects. Thanks for now. Another break. These come at me so fast, after which Christmas is a wonderful time of year for many, but a lot of people are facing great hardship at the moment as well. I'll be talking to my panel about the many difficulties facing families this winter.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back once more to Neil Oliver Live. I have to speak very quickly now because time is behind us all the time. For many around the world, this will be the first chance since the advent of COVID properly to celebrate Christmas. I have to say, me and mine cheerfully ignored any and all restrictions, but there you go, that's just me. But the expectation and pressure of it all can prove too much for some, too much shopping to do, gifts to sort, food to cook. It can also be a time of loneliness for people without loved ones to share the festival with. This year, of course, the cost of lockdown crisis is making life impossibly hard for millions. Energy bills and food bills are already crippling far too many. Christmas, just an added burden. Tom, we need Christmas, don't we, this year? Perhaps more than we have in a long time.
We do, because it's that one time of year when we do get to reflect with family and loved ones. But I think, as you were saying there, Neil, it's not like that for everybody. I'm very fortunate now to have a wonderful family I can spend Christmas with. But I can tell, growing up, before I went into foster care, having the Salvation Army coming around with a pair of gloves and that's all I had for Christmas. There are people who are in that sort of position year in, year out, who are going to make the choice this Christmas between either eating or heating, never mind Christmas presents or being able to afford a decent roast dinner, because frankly, you'll probably worry about whether or not you can afford to heat it. And that's the reality. And I think, to think here we are in 21st century Britain, that we've got words that have entered our lexicon like food bank, warm bank, this sort of notion that we've got to almost live in this enforced austerity just to enjoy what, even during the wartime period, people saw as absolutely fundamental human rights.
Liam, I'm sure you're the economist among us, that what's being quoted in terms of the way prices are going up is way short of the truth. Yeah. I mean, we did a kind of cupboard-filling shop this week, and it was double at least what it had cost us this time last year. Where's the truth of it?
Headline inflation is 11.1%, Neil, but to many people, the idea the cost of living has only gone up 11% since this time last year is a sick joke.
It's 100%.
Particularly for less well-off people. They're disproportionately spending their money on food and fuel and those necessities and energy bills. They've gone up far more than 10%. As you say, they've gone up 50, 80, 100% in some cases. This was meant to be the Christmas. It was the first Christmas free of COVID restrictions or the imminent threat of COVID restrictions since 2019, and yet it's turned out to be the cost of living crisis, as you say, the cost of lockdown crisis Christmas. And then on top of that, we have all kinds of transport strikes, bus strikes, train strikes, motorway maintenance strikes, just when people desperately need their families. It's interesting, Tom, you mentioned wartime. At least in the wartime, people would sit in the front room and have a sing-song. These days,
solidarity
people are more likely to be staring into their screens and their devices. So I desperately want us to have a great Christmas. Wouldn't it be great if England won the World Cup? You may think differently.
No, I'm all for that.
But my concern is that the cost of living is now, the squeeze is so tight, so much more than the headline numbers suggest, that a lot of people, they could find this Christmas free of COVID restrictions even more pressurising, given the intensity of the way the commercial stuff is thrown in your face than the last couple of Christmases when we've had COVID.
Emma, it almost feels like a concerted effort to keep us on edge, doesn't it? It's everything.
Yeah.
It's just one thing after another, and now even Christmas is out
and
of
that's
reach.
the thing. We're not locked down like we have been the last 3 years. It was meant to be the first free Christmas. And I know so many people's Christmas parties have been cancelled next week because they can't get into London. They can't, it's like, so again, once again, hospitality has been absolutely smashed in the next couple of weeks.
And that's across
because
the
of-
regions.
and
You
that's
can't get
across,
trains
so-
in and out of cities.
Yeah,
up
and you
and
can't
down
get, and
the
you know,
country.
postal strikes. Well, are you going to get your cards or not? It's
They're just
yeah.
messing with us.
Yeah.
Coming up after the break, we'll be meeting this week's Great Britain, Liam Wildish, who cleans road signs free of charge in order to make areas look nicer.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back once more to Neil Oliver Live. Still to come in the second hour of the programme. I'm about to speak to this week's Great Britain, Liam Wildish, a window cleaner who also spruces up the road signs in his community without charging a fee. More and more people are considering giving up the rat race to start their own businesses. Entrepreneur Joe Fairley will be here to talk us through the pros and cons. Etiquette expert Laura Windsor will be here to tell us what she makes of Harry and Meghan's explosive Netflix documentary. We'll also be discussing the enduring popularity of Mariah Carey's Christmas song and finding out about my panel's favourite festive tunes. But first, let's get the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Neil, thank you very much. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. At least 3 people have been killed in an explosion on the island of Jersey. The blast happened in a tower block of flats in the early hours of the morning in St Helier. It's feared the number of casualties could still climb, with around a dozen people thought to be missing. Chief Fire Officer Paul Brown says the search and rescue operation could take days.
It is a total collapse. And so the primary challenge is that, one, it is dangerous to operate in and around the area, but secondly, anything that we do or don't do in the wrong way might then jeopardise the chances of survival for somebody who might yet be able to be, sort of rescued. So we have to do everything in a slow, methodical way, and we have to make sure that all of the right equipment with the right expertise is in place in order to do that.
Well, the much-anticipated World Cup quarter-final between England and France has just kicked off, with millions expected to be watching. The winner of that match will face Morocco, which has become the first African nation to make it through to the semi-finals after beating Portugal 1-0. Energy regulator Ofgem says it's extremely concerned that vulnerable people in Sheffield have been without gas for a week. Hundreds of customers were left without heating after a water main burst last Friday, saturating the gas network. Ofgem has described the situation as extremely difficult, made worse by the sudden cold snap. Distribution company Cadent says all affected homes and commercial properties will be automatically compensated. Meanwhile, freezing temperatures have been causing travel problems across the country. Manchester Airport was forced to temporarily close both runways after heavy snow, affecting dozens of flights. Yellow warnings are in place across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, the southwest and southeast of England this weekend, with temperatures expected to drop to as low as -10 degrees in some isolated areas. RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch has called for an urgent meeting with the Prime Minister. It's to try to resolve the long-running dispute over pay and conditions for rail workers. Union members are due to stage 2 48-hour strikes next week, following months of industrial action over the deadlocked row. And around 200 migrants have been intercepted crossing the Channel today. One group managed to land on a beach at Samphire Hoe near Dover. They've now been taken to the Manston Processing Centre. Calmer conditions are reportedly making the journey easier today. Over 44,000 people have crossed the Channel so far this year. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Neil Oliver Live.
Welcome back. Tonight, my Great Britain is a young entrepreneur who's literally brightening his community. Liam Wildish, who's 25, from Clean Scene Window Cleaning, has been widely praised for taking time out from his round in Maidstone in Kent to clean road signs free of charge, making them easier for motorists to read, while also improving the appearance of the area. Liam joins me now. Liam, welcome. Yeah, what inspired you to set yourself this extra work on top of everything else you're doing?
I think it was more to give a give back to the community. So if you look at window cleaning as being quite a community orientated business, where members of the community will sort of share your business with one another, so refer you to neighbours, friends, family and stuff like that. And I thought that was really nice, and that's what's helped build this business up through the early days.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought a nice way of giving back to the community, as well as giving a good report for the business, would be to take care of the community in which you operate. So, of course, road signs, bus stops, things like that.
I like the idea that most people would just drive along, see an almost obliterated, filthy sign and just ignore it, just drive on. But you saw it and thought that there was something you could do.
Yeah, literally, yeah. They're very easy to clean, actually, especially with the setup I've got. It's sort of, even the biggest signs take just a couple of minutes to clean up. And I've actually been making little 30, 40 second little sort of satisfying cleaning videos of the road signs now and posting them online. And that's what's done really well online.
And this is not the first time, is it, that you've embarked on this as a practice where you live and work?
Around, yeah. So I did this 3 years ago when I first set the business up, back in Nottinghamshire where I used to live. And it seems to perform really well. People like the idea of how the business is sort of giving back to the community, and then there's obviously the satisfying side of the road signs.
Tom, these are always encouraging stories to listen to, aren't they? Someone that can see something within their world that they can affect positively.
Oh, it's a fantastic story. And I have to say, as one of those sort of middle-aged dads that drives around, often gets frustrated when I see signs that I can't read, or there's overgrown trees and growth that just sort of prevent you from getting to your destination on time. So I think, brilliant what he's doing. But there's also, though, this other element to it, which I think is changing the nature of how businesses, particularly startups in his case, market themselves successfully. Actually using social media. I mean, you talk a lot about some of the downsides of big tech, and, I agree with you on a lot of these things, but I think, this story also shows you that there's potentially some upside as well. A business that's going just a few weeks, and I think, out in the green room, you were telling me how many tens of thousands of likes and clicks and referrals that you've got as a result of going down that track.
Yeah, tell us a bit about that, the impact that it's had, because it's only been a short period of time, and yet it's already had this big reaction.
Of course, yeah. So I've only been running for 4 weeks. The engagement was almost instant, to be honest. Like, I posted on, I think it was Maidstone Matters Facebook page. It's got about 16,000 members from the Maidstone community on there. I put the videos on there, and straight away it was, 100 likes within 10 minutes and stuff like that. And of course, then it'll catch an algorithm then, so it'll make it the most relevant at the top of the page. And then you've just got comment after comment after comment after comment of people liking the difference. And obviously they can see the difference themselves visually because, pretty much everybody's a motorist and they will drive around and they will see these signs. They'll have seen that the signs are dirty and then they see that they're all clean. And then there's sort of that recognition side there. And then the business that, sort of comes in off the back of that, because obviously they recognise, it's a window cleaning business. So then you get quotes and inquiries and stuff off the back of that. So the business has started to grow.
That's the genius element of it, I think.
It's like ethical marketing in a sense.
You're a businesswoman. This is the right way to think, isn't it?
It is, because we live in the digital world, and everything we do it's digital marketing. It's the bane of our existence, and trying to work out how to, as you said, like the logarithms and get the SEOs and sort of do something like guerrilla. It's very, this is guerrilla marketing. This is sort of that stunt kind of impact. Get noticed, get some attention, go viral. And do you know what? It's also, it's not, there's that sense of it, people just sit around at the moment expecting the world to fall into their laps and everyone to do stuff. It's victim mentality out there at the moment of, someone else can do it for me. So just to see someone, getting off their arse and actually for free with that self-respect and that wanting to fix the community and something to look good and, make that effort is amazing.
And it's that understanding that you've got that, if you give a little, you get something.
Yeah, it's a warm, fuzzy feeling.
Yeah. It's not necessarily why you're doing it. I'm not saying
no, of course, yeah.
If you make that positive contribution, then it begets.
You can get a long way doing something for free for other people. So, of course, obviously this side of marketing, everything comes full circle. It benefits the community. They recognise what you're doing, and through recognising what you're doing, they're recognising your business. So it's also marketing and promoting your business through a good thing. So the rapport that it builds for the business, you just automatically recognised for good things. And that has a positive impact on the people using your business.
How is the window cleaning side of it all? We're overlooking that completely.
Busy. The people that do follow my social media will see that on the Facebook side of things that, the regularity of the posts temporarily has took a bit of a halt while I'm actually processing through all of the new clients. So I'm out going and working at the moment, still creating the content. This isn't just finished. It's not just a one-time thing, they've seen it and it's stopped now. This is actually sort of the little model of my business, is that for as long as it's operating within these communities, I will endeavour to make sure that the business is giving back. So it's sort of the structure of the business in a sense. So if I move to a new area, I start building up new clients and the road signs and stuff are dirty there, I'll endeavour to make sure that they're maintained as well.
I was going to say, how do you police that line between handing out freebies, which you could look at it, in traditional business speak as a loss leader. It's not unusual for businesses to give product away or to give services away. But how do you, in your mind, sort of just police that line between, in any given area, going out there and giving your labour for free, and also you've got bills to pay, increasingly very high bills to pay?
I think it's just an ongoing thing I've got to balance as I go along, to be fair. It's just an ongoing thing. I'd love to say, I can just do a set amount of time of this and set amount of time of this, but it's an ever-evolving thing. So I do tend to spend a day where I will go in a free day, and that's where I will go and do as much as I can in terms of gaining this, or getting as much done effectively. So cleaning as many road signs as I can, getting the content, and then I'll have 3 weeks where I'm working, dealing with the clients, dealing with the business, and I can also then sort of trickle feed the content that I've got onto the social media.
You've probably made a rod for your back. People will be saying to you, the windows are fine, but have you seen the state of the sign at the
I can't read the bus timetable, Yeah, possibly. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but
these are, again, Tom, these are just the positive stories that we need, aren't they?
They're great,
Going into the winter, or in the thick of the winter, when there's so much doom and gloom, and there's so much negativity, to hear this. And you'll be one of many people who are out there doing something about it.
And it's just a reminder, you have tons of these people on your show, people who just go that extra mile. They show that they've got individual agency. Communities have agency as well, and that's what Civic Pride is all about. Every time, every day of the year, not just at Christmas, as they say. So you keep up the good work. Brilliant.
Thank you.
After the break, have you ever considered quitting your job and starting your own business? We'll be speaking to someone who has done exactly that. See you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. Now, have you ever thought of being your own boss, much like Liam Wildish that we were just talking to there as a Great Britain? If so, you're not alone. Many considering quitting their jobs to start up their own operation by themselves. And for those who haven't quite had the confidence so far, 2023 could be the year to take the plunge. My next guest tonight knows all about the challenge of starting a business from scratch and has learned many lessons along the way. Joe Fairley, co-founder of chocolate company Green and Blacks, joins me now. Good evening, Joe. Thank you.
Evening, Neil. Lovely to see you.
Fair to say that Green and Blacks has done quite well, I would say, as a startup.
Pretty well. I mean, I have to say that I never imagined on day one that it would become a kind of global ethical brand. And to be honest, I think if you'd told me that on day one, I might have been too scared to start. But, you know, we built from tiny beginnings in the middle of a recession. And I think that that's a real story of hope for the many, many people out there who are looking to start their own business. And according to a survey by AAT, or commissioned by them, the Association of Accounting Technologists, 1 in 3 people in the last year has either started their own business or seriously contemplated it. And for 18% of people, it's honestly the only way that they can feel that they can progress in their work. So I think that bodes really well for the future. You know, as you were just saying, there's a lot of doom and gloom around, but actually there's a lot of positivity too.
What experience did you have in business when you started Green and Blacks? You talk about starting it, with very little and on a very small scale.
I had no experience as a business person. I was a journalist, actually, and a magazine editor. And my skill has always been putting myself in my customer's shoes. And so that was really what I brought to the business. I was in business with my husband, and he did have a lot of business experience, but I took care of the PR and the marketing, the product development, the branding, the design, the sampling, etc. So I really had a lot of lessons to learn very quickly.
What are the common mistakes made by startups? Or is there such a thing as a common mistake?
Yeah, I think there is. And one is kind of not looking after the money side of it. I mean, I think as a creative person, it really helps to have somebody either on your team or an accountant backing you up who can tell you your financial position at any single time, because actually that's the make or break for any business. It's cash flow, it's are we making a profit, it's have we filed our VAT return on time or whatever. And I don't think that anyone going into business should necessarily expect to have all the skill sets required for setting up their own business. So you might be really, really creative, but on the other hand, you might not have the financial nous to kind of push the business forward or even write your first business plan. So I think that what doesn't work very often is when you have two creative people working together and then nobody remembers to invoice the customers. But I've seen that happen more than once, let me tell you.
Emma, what's been your experience as working in private business? How do you find the confidence to just start something that hasn't previously existed?
I think I started my business when I was 25.
Okay.
And fix, and I wasn't happy with. And so I think a lot of people launch businesses because they are annoyed that what they're looking for isn't out there. So they see something missing and they want to fill that. And I say, there's a fire in your belly so a lot of people, when I say it, I see a lot of people go, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. And you go, I've been doing it 17 years and I hate that title. And I think most people do that. They want to fix something, they start something without really thinking of the label of, I'm going to be my own boss, I'm going to launch my own business. It's like, no, I'm going to do this. And then suddenly you sit there and go, oh my God, I'm running my own business. How did that happen?
Jo, does that resonate with you? Did there seem to be something glaringly absent from the marketplace and you felt that you had the answer?
Well, as it happens, I stumbled across 2 squares of dark chocolate sitting on my husband's desk and I put them in my mouth and this taste explosion went off and it was like, oh my God, this is the darkest, yummiest, naughtiest chocolate I've ever eaten. I kind of didn't even know I wanted it until I tasted it. And then
where had he got it from?
It's a very long story, but it was a sample bar that had crossed his desk. He was in the natural food business with a brand called Whole Earth, but couldn't launch a chocolate bar because it had sugar in, and his whole company ethos with Whole Earth was no added sugar. And so it's like, I've got to do this. I've got to share this with the world. And I remembered a postcard that I'd bought in Carnaby Street when I was 16 of a man on a diving board. And it basically said, if you don't do it, you'll never know what would have happened if you had done it. And I went to the edge of the diving board because I really did, I discovered something that wasn't out there and I really wanted to share it.
Mm-hmm. Jo, part of what attracted me to GB News actually was that it was a startup. I mean, I wasn't part of putting together the structure of it, but I was attracted by the idea of it being something new, without a backstory and without a history. And I wonder if people, in part, who have an inclination about a business idea, it is that idea of starting something completely new and all of the opportunities that then present themselves because you have a tabula rasa blank slate.
I agree. And I think you're much more likely to be successful if you're not just copying what somebody else does. You know, I've really got no time for businesses which go, oh, they're doing something really clever, let's do the same thing. I think the really successful businesses are the ones that just do something differently, bring people something that they either didn't know they wanted or you know, were looking for, but couldn't find. And that's what I mean about putting yourself in the customer's shoes, etc. But there is a brilliant, I do have to signpost anybody who's looking to start their own business to a really fab website called informe.com, which is, it's basically got a informe.co.uk actually. There's actually an ebook there that you can download about how to start a business in 20 days. And it's got every single bit of the roadmap that you need to get from, you know, 0 to 60 in 20 days. And I really, really wish that I'd had something like that, because as you say, I had to learn it kind of going along. But I think the amazing thing about going into business now, you know, is that you've got extraordinary resources at your fingertips, literally on your computer. And that's a great bonus for startups now compared to even 10 years ago. There wasn't nearly so much information out there. And I always say to people, take all the free help you can get. You know, there's loads out there. This is not a lonely furrow that you have to plough alone.
Tom, do you think that if there is a drive, more people starting businesses, is it a response to something else? I mean, we're listening, you know, Emma and Joe saying that it's about having a fire and having an idea, but do you think maybe the changing environment out there is not forcing people, but persuading more people to think, well, maybe I better just do it for myself?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're all stuck in this kind of psychological contract, aren't we? You know, do we take a job or do we make a job, i.e. make a job for ourselves and for others? I mean, throughout my career, I've set up 2 successful businesses, 1 for-profit, 1 non-profit. I've also had a spectacular failure with a business as well that just went completely nowhere and cost me loads of money of investment.
What was that, Tom?
Up front. Well, it was back in 2016. I launched a marketing website called loveapprenticeship.com, and it was about trying to expand the number of apprenticeship opportunities. The trouble is, it happened right at the time when the Chancellor changed the whole funding mechanism. I won't go into the technical detail, but for how apprenticeships in this country are funded. So all the work I'd put into the business model about how to market this service was almost made redundant overnight. And I think this is often the challenge for so many entrepreneurs. You can have the basic idea, but in the end, if you don't have all the tools at your disposal to execute that business plan, then it won't go anywhere. And I do think, you know, I mean, it's really interesting that in this country, we're very good actually at start-up businesses. The number of businesses that get set up by Companies House as limited companies is in the hundreds of thousands every year. It's just a bare fact that half of all businesses that are set up fail within the first year. And actually, when you look at Britain's challenge compared to the United States and other countries around the world that are really good at the entrepreneurship thing, it's really how do we take startups to what is also called scale-ups. You know, we don't have these big unicorn businesses, as they're called, you know, these sort of billion-dollar-plus businesses in this country, often because we sort of fail at that important point between setting up what some might call lifestyle businesses, which is about just making a job for yourself and a few others around you, and actually taking those business on to be world leaders, world-beating companies. That's a real challenge for Britain.
Joe, do you agree with that? Is there something missing in the system where people can have the best idea, get it to a certain point, and the framework or the support and backup isn't there to create that next step to greatness?
Yes, I mean, I think, you know, it's pretty sad. A few years ago, the government withdrew the sort of enterprise agencies around the UK, which offered a lot of hand-holding to people. And scaling up is really important. I mean, after 9 years, we took investment from private equity into Green and Blacks. Then it was sold to Cadbury's in 2005. Craig and I, my husband and I, are still involved with Green and Blacks now. But at a certain point, you have to go, you know what, I need help with this. And in fact, when we took investment from private equity, some guys came in. We had a new financial director, new MD, new marketing director who came from Burger King, who was, you know, that was a bit upsetting for a couple of vegetarians, but it turned out to be exactly the perfect guy to kind of move the business forward. And so I think, you know, when you've got that financial picture of your business, it will get to a certain point, and in our case, it was all stock holding. I mean, if you've got a physical product and your sales are growing and growing and growing, you're going to have terrible cash flow challenges. And that carefully found accountant from AAT is going to come in and say, look, we can't pay the bills this week. And so I think at some point, my husband turned to me and said, well, I'd rather have a smaller percentage of something than 100% of nothing. You know, the reality is that many businesses go through that terribly scary moment of thinking that it's all going to be lost. And that, you know, as we just heard, half of businesses do fail in the first year, but half succeed. Half are still there. And I think that's, you know, it's glass half full for me. And I look around and I see all kinds of incredible, exciting startups. So I feel really positive at the moment, actually. And I would just add to the point about why are people looking to start their own businesses at the moment. You know, we've heard a lot about how many employers now are trying to push people back into the workplace, actually bums on seats in the office. And I think a lot of people are going, you know what, I actually work much better under my own steam. I can work to my body clock. I mean, in my case, you know, I'm a lark. I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Other people, my husband works really well at 11 o'clock at night. And the kind of average 9 to 5 absolutely doesn't take that into account at all.
Yeah. I find it just exciting and inspirational. I'm always taken in, you know, with people who have an idea and have actually been able to do something with it. I find that, you know, truly life affirming when people are able to get a business up off the ground, whatever it is. You know, it could be anything at all. I'm always encouraged by listening to that kind of fire in people.
It's really simple too. I can't turn my camera around, but you would see that there's a sign on my wall that says things only get done when you do them. And I think that's the key difference. We all know lots and lots of people who kind of talk about doing things, and we've got mates who go on about what they're going to do. But actually, at the end of the day, it's about rolling up your sleeves. It's about, you know, following that 20-day road plan, that, you know, 20 days to start your business from informe.co.uk, and actually putting one foot in front of the other, because at the end of the day, that's the only way you start a business, is you stop talking about it and you start doing it.
Inspirational stuff. Jo Fairley, entrepreneur, thank you so much for your time this evening. Coming up after the break, Netflix released a documentary this week, you might have noticed, about Harry and Meghan, which got a bit of press coverage here and there. Etiquette expert Laura Windsor will be here to tell us what she made of the programme so far.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
As a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
She's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the programme. For a man who has said he wanted his family to have a quieter life, Prince Harry has a funny way of going about it. He and his missus, not to mention their kids, are once again the talk of the town following the release of a Netflix documentary in which they reveal intimate details of their relationship and family life. It must be tricky when your whole MO is complaining about press intrusion and the behaviour of the media and how sad it's made you feel, and yet your business model is predicated upon flogging your privacy to the highest bidder. Anywho, joining me now to unpick the thinking of the shrinking violets of Sussex is etiquette expert Laura Windsor. Good evening and welcome, Laura.
Thank you, it's great to be here.
Against all of my better instincts, I have been drawn into this, I have to say, and I did watch it because I thought I'm going to end up having to talk about it. What did you make of what has been put out there so far?
Well, I can only speak about royal etiquette. And there's two major royal etiquette breaches. I wouldn't actually call it royal etiquette. It's etiquette of everyday living. Mm-hmm. Because who wants to hang their dirty laundry for the whole world to see? No one. Everyone likes to keep their private life private. That's why it's called private life. And another breach would be this never complain, never explain. First coined by Abraham Disraeli. Benjamin Disraeli, yes, during the Victorian era. And it sounds rather archaic, but if you think about it, there is timeless wisdom there. Because if I were to come up to you and start and greet you, and then start whining and complaining and saying, oh, you don't know what my life is like, it's terrible, and everyone's treating me badly, and you become a victim and you become very selfish.
Emma, should they be held accountable to that kind of etiquette, Harry and Meghan, given that, well, hypothetically at least, they've stepped away from the firm? Are they still bound by the don't explain?
I think, well, as you said, it's general etiquette, and I can't stand it when I see people on social media oversharing and like sharing their personal life and complaining about, and you just think that's your private life. And I just think what they're doing is so disrespectful, and that's not just a royal thing. It is the disrespect for his family. I mean, the Queen hasn't even been dead 3 months. It's sort of they're still grieving that family. Charles is grieving his mum, and they go on about and they talk about Diana and his mum. And you're like, but hang on a minute. You've got a whole family here grieving their mum, and just the way the clips. I haven't seen it because I just can't bring myself to watch it. But I've seen the trailer clips, and that's enough for me to want to vomit, quite frankly.
Tom, I find it anthropologically fascinating.
I do too. Although I'm not an anthropologist.
Well, nor am I. But that kind of people watching aspect and wondering what's going on in people's heads. And I was in terms of the first episode. The fact that they started these video diaries,
yes,
talking sadly into their phones, ostensibly, right back at the beginning, as soon as they stepped away from their royal duties, they must have been thinking, there's a buck to be made here and we better start putting down the groundwork.
Yeah, well, that's the key, isn't it? Because not only is it Netflix, you also see very early on in the byline, it's Archwell Productions. This is a production. This isn't reality TV. This isn't even serious documentary. This is a couple who, until they made the decision to, in a sense, quit the royal family, they made the decision to come off the civil list, which, of course, we as taxpayers pay into that list in order to pay for their every need in terms of their security, to pay for their housing, to pay for their welfare, in return for being a part of an institution that's 1,000 years old, but in more modern times has been an institution that's about public service. Now, what I find fascinating about the whole thing, in terms of what's really going on here, is that Meghan clearly didn't know what she was marrying into. I think it's clear when you even look at her. Well,
how could you not? Quite well publicised, the
exactly. But it's clear. It's clear to me that she felt that she was marrying into some Disney princess fairy tale. Even this throwaway line about, there was no manual, there was no protocol, like you see in the movies. I do think that raises questions actually for the institution, the firm, as you call it, in terms of how we do bring people into the royal family. But it's ultimately, for me, it's a whole narcissistic episode, and that's what's also quite fascinating.
Laura, from an etiquette point of view, how much of this ought the royal family to put up with? Do they have, in terms of don't complain, don't explain, is there a statute of limitations on that? Are they just supposed to absorb unlimited attacks on character without response?
Well, they have responded in a way. It's been full of empathy and conciliatory. They haven't come back with an attack because that way they would be putting themselves on the same level as Meghan and Harry. Right. It has to, for a retort to be poignant, it has to be short, to the point, and conciliatory. And I think they've done that very well.
Do you think there must surely be a shelf life in what Meghan and Harry are doing?
Yes.
They've stepped away, and this is presumably the video diaries they kept for a couple of years before going to Netflix or Netflix coming to them. You can't keep reheating this, or can you?
Well, I think they're finished in a way. People aren't stupid. They know what's going on. It's pretty obvious. So I think after this, they will really, they should be leading a private life. Quiet life.
I don't think they'll have any option because they won't get any other offers to do anything.
Are we not encouraged to think that they actually go over rather well in America, though?
But the American press what I've seen, have actually been quite anti it and said this is sort of just hot air. There's nothing exciting in it when you actually watch it. You watch the trailer and think it's going to be gripping, but then when you watch it in full, there's no big revelations. And someone said to me the other day who it works in Netflix, and is that the response has been a bit of a flop, and already we would have been hearing about a sequel. If it was taking well, then you'd hear now that the possibility of it's going to carry on, and I just think it's going to run. It's trending at the moment just because of that voyeurism of wanting, the hype around it, and then that's it. I think it's just going to fall flat in its face.
I've been around making documentary television of a sort for a long time, and you kind of tend to watch television in a different way, and it looked very contrived to me. The setups, the things that were supposed to look ad hoc and spontaneous,
absolutely
didn't look like that to me. They looked set up, styled, and staged.
Yeah, even there's a scene where they're just driving along. I think it's in Toronto, and they're talking about the Paps that are following behind, but you never actually see the Paps that are following behind. You just see Harry sort of looking nervously over his shoulder, and she's in the car with her sunglasses on. It does look very, very contrived, and it's, I think, to try and get this message across to the audience. I think this is what they're intending, that these people are innocent victims of celebrity culture. There's obviously the underpinning narrative as well, certainly of the first couple of episodes I watched, that this all harks back to the way in which Harry and William's mother was treated. She was hounded by the press to her death in many ways. So there's that element, but this is all about, I think, trying to seek empathy and forgiveness from us, the British public, for them deciding to turn their back on the royal institution.
Laura, what do you think about the way Meghan makes fun of the British? She seems to have an endless stock in trade about, how we're unemotional and cold and...
Yes, but that has to do with culture, doesn't it? We're not huggers, or at least not in the beginning. We need time to get to know people, and that's because we love to keep... We're very respectful of other people's privacy, and so we're not sort of very forceful and...
I just hug everyone. I'm a hugger.
I'm a hugger.
Okay, but a lot of people aren't.
But no, I grew up abroad.
Exactly. And that helps.
So
But not everybody is like that, and politeness is subjective. What is polite in our culture may not be polite in another.
But you think what is new? And this is why I just want to draw a reference actually to what's been going on with Matt Hancock and that whole affair is that we are seeing increasing, I think, these so-called public servants, these public figures, who for whatever reason fall into a calamity, but then seek to leverage that public service that they've been able to serve at our gift, as it were, and try and make obscene amounts of money out of it. We saw this with Matt Hancock trousering £400,000 to go off into the jungle. I think we're going to see it now with Archwell Productions. I'm less confident, actually, that we've seen the last of them, that this is just the one-off make or break documentary. I think.
Who do you think their intended audience is, Laura? Given that the British people presumably won't like the running snideness about the British way and the way the British are. It doesn't feel as if it's been made for our consumption. Is it just an American confection, or who's going to watch it?
Well, I think the whole world will watch it, but
I won't
there'll
watch
be
any more.
opinions.
I've seen it. I've seen all I need to see. I just wanted to see I just wanted to see the shape and the outline of it.
It probably is targeted at Americans. She lives in America. She is American, and therefore she thinks she has the right to make fun of us. But there'll be other cultures who probably will think that she's completely out of order because their culture may be similar to the Brit culture. So it really depends.
I think it's just a sad indictment of where we are across a broad range of the social spectrum at the moment. I think it's just a sad
It is very sad.
spectacle. Laura Windsor, royal etiquette expert, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have to go to another break now, after which Mariah Carey is back at #1 in the charts once again. We'll discuss the enduring popularity of her festive favourite and see which Christmas tunes send my panellists to the dance floor.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Welcome back. And finally, all I want for Christmas is a bit of peace and quiet, actually. But for millions out there, it appears Christmas isn't Christmas without a bit of Mariah Carey. Her omnipresent Christmas standard, All I Want for Christmas Is You, released in 1994 and #1 first time around in 2020. Now, that surprised me. I thought it had been a #1 much earlier. Has topped the charts once more after being streamed 10.8 million times, even knocking Taylor Swift off the top spot. It's back in the news, so I suppose we ought to have a quick listen. I'm all for it. I'm all for a Christmas song. I'm all for everything to do with Christmas, really, whatever makes people confident about it. I think we have my final guest is showbiz commentator Sarah Robertson, and she's here to tell us what it is about Mariah Carey that keeps her coming back and back and back.
Hi there, Neil. Good evening to you. Well, Mariah is the undisputed, unofficial queen of Christmas. Once Mariah officially announces that Christmas is upon us, that's when you know the Christmas spirit is here. She sort of just has inherited or created this moniker for herself. And I think it's because of this song, because it is just universally loved by all. If you're a child of the 80s, you really, really just adore this song and appreciate it. And I think as well, the universal appeal and why it's such a Christmas chestnut and such a universally loved song is because it has the word you in it. It gives you this sort of sense of eternal optimism and just brings an heralded joy, and everyone just joins in, and it feels very personal, a song. And I think that's why it just has this really warm reception and is just universally loved and surges in popularity every festive season. It's almost, once you hear the opening beats to it, that is the start of Christmas. Christmas is upon us. Once you hear that, the festive season is beginning.
I'm fascinated with the fact that it has almost retrospectively made Mariah Carey into a one-hit wonder. That whole catalogue of work, and yet the constant playing of that song, I think, is almost making it as if it's the only song she ever sang.
Oh, no, I disagree there, because I think true Mariah fans know she has a repertoire of work, and her voice is just one of the best we've ever had in modern music. I think it's just the popularity of the song, and look, Mariah does not complain at all. She loves it. Christmas for her is such a special time. I mean, she's spoken herself in her past. She had quite a hard start, quite a difficult upbringing, and for her, Christmas is a very important time of year, and she wants to sort of create that childlike joy and wonder that she missed out on. So she likes that people associate her with Christmas. She lives up to it, that's how people see her. She's kind of classed as this bit of a, I don't want to say the word diva, because that's not fair to Mariah, because I just adore her. But people just associate her with Christmas and big extravagant gestures. She says herself, she has 4 Christmas trees in her house. She goes all out to make it a spectacular thing for her family. And I love that. I think that's wonderful. So I don't think she minds that people do associate her in that way. But I think true fans of Mariah, true music fans know she she is more than that. But the other thing as well, she's not going to dispute, and I'm sure she's very happy with, is the song generates $2.5 million every year for her once it starts playing.
No.
So, Neil, that's not a bad amount of money, is it now, coming in for a song that only took her 15 minutes to co-write.
£2.5 million. Wow. I don't suppose I really need to ask you. I'm imagining this is your favourite Christmas song of all Christmas songs. Would that be true?
For Mariah herself?
No, yours. Your own favourite Christmas song.
Oh, yours. I think Mariah's, it probably would be that, actually. I mean, I like my traditional carols, I have to say. So first and foremost, I'm always going to pick a traditional carol. But if I'm to pick a modern piece of music, I would say, yeah, because I'm a child of the 80s, so it would be Mariah Carey's. It's, as soon as I hear it, I just get the festive Christmas spirit upon me. I have to be loyal to Mariah, and I've been fortunate enough to see her in concert at the O2 a few years ago, and it was winter time, and when she sang that song, the crowd erupted. We just went wild, and she loved it. You know, she came out dressed in the red and everything, and you can see she just adores it. She loves the reception and how universally loved it is. So I don't think Mariah minds at all being associated with that song. And who wouldn't be? Which artist would not love to be number one twice with a song?
Your passion for Mariah and that song, I cannot argue with it. It's lovely to hear, lovely to see. So thank you, Sarah Robertson, for joining us this evening. Lovely stuff. Emma, where are you on Christmas songs? Is there something that touches your soul at this time of year?
Do you know, I'm a bit of a closet. I started beginning of November with the Heart Christmas in the radio. The songs, Christmas carols and songs just give me that feel.
Does Christmas always get to you early, or is it?
I refuse to buy presents or anything until later. I don't do that in November, but I just had the music on in the car because I just needed that. Yeah, I think driving home for Christmas, like Chris Rea, I love that. That's got to feel good.
That is a perfect song.
It's a really good song. But then but at the moment, I'm in the middle of Nativity Hell with 3 little kids. They're all doing different nativities. So
is that technically how it's described?
Nativity Hell. We're trying to work out which one's doing what, and then they've all been modernised. So I'm like, I just want a classic nativity playing. Who's playing Mary, and you know, but it's sort of.
Is it not Mary and Joseph?
So yeah, now I've got sort of songs like, you know, I'm riding on a donkey, bumpity bumpity bump, bumpity bumpity bump, going round and round my head 24/7 at the moment.
Christmas song, Tom?
Oh, Christmas song. I mean, there's a couple. I mean, one that probably wouldn't pass the offence archaeology test, and that's the Pogues and the classic fairy tale from New York. Again, similar to Emma, you know, why do we listen to music? It's because it brings that emotional connection, and that's what Christmas is all about, and that's what makes it so special. So, you know, I've played that song endless times every single Christmas.
There is a lyrical genius about it, though. You don't always expect a Christmas song to tell a story.
Yeah.
But Fairy Tale of New York absolutely tells a story.
It does, yeah. But not played on Radio 2 or other BBC outlets, I'm told, because of some comments that seem to be beyond the pale.
And you said that was one of 2?
It was one of 2. Well, look, like Sarah, I'm also, I've got a pick, or a very common one. So like Sarah, I mean, I'm also a child of the 80s, so I still remember fondly, perhaps not so fondly, those school discos with Wham and Last Christmas and Careless Whispers and the heartbreak of that time of year. So yes, when I hear that song on the radio, I think back to some of those failed romances.
I definitely feel as I get older, I become more and more sentimental about all of it. And now, White Christmas, Bing Crosby, and all of that, you know, just I fought against it for most of my adult life, and then by a process of attrition, I've just given in. And now, you know, watching White Christmas.
Like Little Drummer Boy as well. That's
That's all from me on Neil Oliver Live tonight. My thanks as always to my panel, to Emma, to Tom, thank you. All my guests this evening. Next up, it's Mark Dolan tonight.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking cold but mainly dry with some showers for northern and western coasts. Let's take a look at the details. Across southwest England, showers will ease for many inland but will continue for northern coasts of Devon and Cornwall and may turn wintry in places. A cold evening with a widespread frost. A mostly dry evening for southeast England, though, maybe the odd shower for far southern coasts. Cold with a chance of freezing fog in places. For southern Wales, showers will continue around the coast, though any further inland may be wintry. Staying cold again with a frosty night to come. Across the Midlands, a mostly dry evening to come with maybe just the odd shower that may turn wintry over any higher ground. Cold once again with some freezing fog developing in places. For northeast England, it will be a dry end to Saturday though, and we may see the odd light shower for coasts. Some mist or freezing fog developing through the evening and feeling cold. Showers will push southwards across southern Scotland this evening and overnight, some of which will be of snow over high ground and a mix of rain and snow to lower levels. A widely dry evening across Northern Ireland with some clear spells developing. A chance of the odd shower mainly in the northeast later, which could be wintry over high ground. A cold and frosty night with some patches of freezing fog. Showers, some wintry, continuing for northern and western coasts. And that's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.